I think that, yep, that's recording.
Okay, this is the July 2nd, 2020 meeting of the Boulder County Historic Preservation Advisory Board. Will now come to order. And the obligatory announcement is due to COVID-19 concerns, and since some Boulder County offices are closed indefinitely, this meeting will be held virtually, as is obvious. Information how to participate in the virtual meeting has been posted on Historic Preservation Advisory Board webpage, and there will be an opportunity to remotely provide public comment on the subject documents during the respective virtual public hearing portions for each item. And instruction will be provided at that point. I will now take a roll call, although I can see most people here, but for the record, Caitlin McKenna, please answer here.
Here.
I am Charles Gray. I'm here. Jason Emery.
Here.
Larry Powers.
Here.
Margot Leach.
Here.
Mark Goering.
Here.
Marissa Ferrara.
Here.
Rosalind Skamehorn.
Here.
Has Stan Nielsen joined us? Guess he isn't going to make it. Are there any corrections to the previous meeting's minutes? Hearing none, I recommend approval. Do I have a motion?
I move we accept the minutes as presented.
Do I have a second? Thank you. The minutes stand as posted. And do we have any members of the public who are here for comments on items that are not otherwise listed on the agenda? Hearing none, I will now close the public comment period. We have 3 dockets scheduled for today's HPAB meeting. At this time, I'll take the opportunity to explain the public hearing process. An opportunity to remotely provide comments after staff and board inputs. Would the staff please present the first item? I don't have the docket numbers open here. My apologies.
So for the first item on the agenda, I'll share my screen. Have we taken care of all the logistics, Jessica? You can just nod. Okay, so I will attempt to share my screen and see if that works. And so does that show up properly?
It does.
Okay.
I've seen it.
Great, thanks.
Is it Springdale?
Yes, so the first item on the agenda is docket HP 20-0001, the Springdale application. This is located at 1029 James Canyon Drive, and the applicant is Eric Harms. And we're here to determine if the nominated property qualifies for designation and determine if the application is complete and formulate recommendations for the county commissioners. The request is to designate all of the newly configured parcel at 1029 James Canyon Drive. And a few of you who were on the subcommittee meeting where we looked at the referral for when they did the subdivision exemption to reconfigure the property lines might recall the referral that we received on this. It includes the Springhouse, a barn, the bathrooms, numerous mine shafts and stone foundations. The area of Springdale began as a mining camp in 1874 when precious tellurite ores were discovered in the area. At its height, Springdale was a community of about 300 people, and there were a lot of cabins, an assayer, postmaster, general store, saloon, that were all constructed along James Creek. The name Springdale was in reference to a few area mineral springs, rich in sulfur, radon, and iron. As the mining economy began to decline, the area transitioned to be promoted as a summer resort with healing waters. In 1875, the Seltzer House Hotel was opened, making it one of the earliest spa resorts in Colorado. The hotel included at least 10 small family cottages, a bathhouse, a bowling alley, and a bottling plant. Most of Springdale's buildings were wiped out during the 1894 flood, and the Seltzer House Hotel burned down in 1903. Two events which primarily account for the town's decline. In 1919 to 1920, a statewide analysis on mineral springs was conducted by the USGS, and they found the Springdale waters were the most highly radioactive in the state. This eventually prompted the name to be changed to Curie Springs in honor of Madame Marie Curie, the discoverer of radium. Alan Beatrice Friel purchased the property in 1946 after 2 decades of finding relief to Beatrice's arthritis from drinking the spring water. They operated the business until Mr. Friel passed away in 1966. In 2013, the flood destroyed the Friel's house, as well as a bottling house and an open pavilion. In February of this year, a subcommittee of the board found the remaining historic resources in the site of Springdale to be eligible for landmark status under Criterion 1. They then reviewed the docket, which again was that subdivision exemption to adjust the boundary lines between 2 properties in the same ownership, and they unanimously gave their support to the docket with the condition that the resources be landmarked with the county. So we found that the property qualifies under Criterion 1. It's significant for its association with the former settlement of Springdale, a mining camp turned recreational town along James Creek. And we're recommending that you approve and recommend to the county commissioners that they approve the docket under Criterion 1 and subject to the 2 standard conditions describing when a certificate of appropriateness is needed for alteration. And I will run through the pictures here. The map showing where it's located on James Creek, just below Jamestown. It's a long property that winds along the creek. This is a map that shows the earlier configuration. You see the little rectangle on the northern part of the property, and as part of that subdivision exemption, that area was expanded slightly, and we're landmarking the remainder piece, which is the larger part of the property. And then this is an aerial that shows where the resources are located, the Springhouse, the barn, and the bathrooms. And then some photos of the current conditions with the Springhouse, the barn, and the bathrooms. The Ellen Mine entrance and compressor. And some of the historic photos. Here's the Springhouse as it appeared in 1965. And the town site in 1899 when there were more resources there. And here's the Seltzer House Hotel before it was burned. And here's a CU physics professor who was out with the Geiger counter in 1952. And then just some of the facilities with Mr. Friel when they bottled the water. An old label from when they were selling bottles. And then just some of the brochures that advertise the facility. And so I've included here a recommended motion that you can all use if you find it convenient. And that's all I have. If you have any questions for me.
I have a question.
So if you can identify which board member it is, or
Hi, Margot Leach. I have a question about that can everybody hear me?
yeah, you're breaking up
Yeah.
a little bit, but I can hear you.
Okay, I was wondering that 1965 photograph of the Springhouse. It looks like it's in pretty nice condition. Yeah, that one. It looks much nicer than it does look today. Is that correct?
I mean, it was definitely in better condition 50 years ago. It's been through a lot since then with floods and various other things that have happened. So, yeah, that's the Springhouse as it is today.
That's too bad.
We would very much like to restore it at some point. The flood was not easy on the building, and it was already in some form of bad shape following the death of the Friels. The property was largely a summer rental and wasn't cared for as well as I believe they did. I'm only hypothesizing, though.
So, Eric, this is Denise, and can you, for the record, provide your name and your address? And Chuck, I think we can go into the public comment and recognize Eric to speak.
Sure. So I'm assuming that Eric Harms is the owner or applicant, and so if you could identify yourself, please, and then when you have finished your comments, then we will open it for public comment.
Yes, that's correct. My name is Eric Harms. My address is 1126 James Canyon Drive, and I am the owner of 1029 James Canyon Drive. I apologize if I spoke out of line earlier.
Oh, that's okay.
Not
No
a problem.
I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have about the property. It has quite a fascinating history.
This is Margot. If you were to say like your favorite interesting thing about the property, what is it?
The most interesting thing about the property, I believe that it is in fact an old town site that a lot of people do not know about because it did fade into obscurity following the flood of 1894 and similar events. And I do hope that landmarking it can be recognized and preserved. Most interesting thing is probably just that. It was a town, and our home used to be inhabited by 300 other people, and people came here for seeking their fortune, seeking relief from various ailments, and we find that to be particularly fascinating. The Curie Spring itself does still flow, and most impressively, because it is so high in radium, I am told that it does actually sparkle in the dark, which puts on quite a light show for those who wish to see it. Unfortunately, the Springhouse is not in the best of shape, so you can't really go in there to see it at night. But it did have a viewing chamber and an inhaling room back in the day, so I imagine it provided quite a bit of interesting experiences for the folks who visited this place in the past.
Are you going to restore those things that you just described? The rooms?
We would like to restore both the barn and the Springhouse at some point. Certainly, having landmark status will allow us to apply for, as I'm told, grants to assist us in that endeavor. Yeah, it certainly deserves preservation.
Very nice project.
Chuck, this
Yep.
is Rosalind Scammahorn. I have a does anybody have any record of the results that happen from drinking radon infused water.
So this
So
is,
there are a number. Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
There are a number of testimonials in old Daily Camera articles, which I have found to be quite fascinating to dig up and read. A number of people swore by its health benefits. And in fact, we did have the water tested by the state lab a few years ago, and they found it to be quite high in radium, as well as arsenic and other unpleasant things. The scientist who tested the water was actually quite surprised to hear that it was in fact natural. He was very fascinated by that.
And this is Denise. I remember reading when we were first doing research on the property that they were ordered by the government to stop bottling it because of the high levels of radium.
I would imagine.
That's correct. Yes, it was sold, I'm told, nationwide through the 50s and the 60s, and until it was in fact shut down for those reasons.
Now, is it not dangerous to be exposed to that?
I'm
Well,
sorry,
I
I
think it
didn't
is
quite
dangerous,
understand.
and that's why it was shut down.
Right. But now, is it still radioactive, and is it,
Oh, it's going to be radioactive forever.
right, so is that not a problem to be around?
It is certainly not water that I would want to drink, even if I were very thirsty. And the scientist who tested the water advised as such.
Interesting.
Is the area safe for habitation?
So it is certainly safe for habitation. There isn't any health risk due to the water itself, as long as you don't drink it, or I imagine breathe. You know, like if you were in an enclosed space with the spring there, the radium becomes radon, and we all know that that is not good to breathe in. But as far as the surrounding landscape goes, it's quite habitable if it weren't for the flood risk. That is why there are no more structures currently around, including the Friels home and, unfortunately, some of their other buildings.
So
So
did
are
you buy
there
it?
any
Did
other?
you buy it just because you were interested in it? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering why you purchased the property.
So interestingly enough, we were actually under contract to purchase the Friels home, and the flood destroyed it while we were under contract, about 2 to 3 weeks, I believe, before we closed on the property. So we dodged a really big bullet there, obviously, and what we ended up doing was approaching the people who lived in the home that you saw as the separate parcel, which is a historic home from the Springdale era. It's one of the last surviving structures from that town. And we approached them asking if we could rent their home because we were planning on rebuilding after the flood of 2013. And they agreed to that, but they also said that we could even buy it if we wanted to, and we did. And now we are perfectly happy with the home that we have. We have no desire to build. And now the 1029 James Canyon Drive serves as this really amazing buffer, I guess, around our home, which we have really enjoyed seeing come back to life after the flood. And we have really enjoyed fostering and caretaking ever since we moved here in 2014.
That's fantastic. That's so perfect that you're living in a historic house right there. That's really great.
Yes, in fact, if you go back to that old photo of Springdale, you can see our home. It's smack dab in the middle of that photo. It's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Can we look at that, please? And is
Yeah,
that a
so you see
landmark
that little-
building?
No, it currently is not. It's the original home exists as sort of the bones of our home. It's had a number of additions, and it's a modern home on the inside. But that little home with the 2 windows and the 2 stories, you can kind of see the horizontal logs right in the middle of that photo. That's our home.
I'm having trouble seeing things. I can just see one person at a time, unfortunately.
That's all, that's all I can see.
Very cool.
So, Denise, this is Marissa Ferreira. I had a question about the landmarking itself. So we are landmarking the entire property, correct? Not an individual building?
Right. So it's the entire site at 1029. So it's, again, this longer parcel. Let me go back to the map. So if you look at this, can you see that, Marissa?
Yeah. Yes, I can.
Okay. So everything except there's a little area up in here that's the enlarged parcel where Eric's house is. That's not included in the landmarking. But everything else outlined in red is included. With some of the buildings then being contributing.
Got it. So given that there are a lot of mine shafts in this property, what happens if we landmark it and then later you need to, do some mine shaft mitigation because it's dangerous? How does that work with a landmark situation?
So then we would just review how they're doing it. So if, there are a number of methods we've approved at different times and been comfortable with in terms of mine closures for safety that we're still okay with. So you might not want to just bulldoze the whole thing and leave it. You might look at maybe a grate or something like that, or some kind of plug. But there are a number of methods, that are perfectly acceptable, even if it is landmarked.
So is that things like that covered under the standard criteria, like the regular maintenance?
It depends. I would say in general, it might fall under something that would require a certificate of appropriateness, but we would just review how they were proposing to close it, and if it seemed reasonable and not too disruptive, it'd be something we could easily approve.
Okay, thank you.
On that note, if you go to the photo of the Ellen mine shaft, you can see a gate that was installed by the State Division of Mining Reclamation and Safety a couple of years ago. And you can kind of see what their current methods are. Grates are preferred because a particular species of bat, the Townsend's long-eared bat, tends to use these mine shafts as habitat, and we want to make sure that we can allow that still while remaining safe for anyone who happens to be passing by.
This is Jessica Basic.
What animals use it for habitat?
It's a species of bat called the Townsend's long-eared bat, I believe. They're really cute.
Oh, very. And they're not poisonous. They don't have venom. Do we know?
I don't think any of that does.
No.
So Jessica, it sounded like maybe had some logistic.
I did. I wanted to let people know that if they cannot see Denise's screen, if you click on Denise's circle down on the bottom, it should pop back up.
I clicked on her circle, but it's not anything.
It's not bringing back up her presentation.
No. It's okay. It's okay.
Okay, and then also I wanted to let Chuck know, it looks like we have at least a couple of hands raised of members that wanted to speak.
Okay, sure. Whoever thinks they were first, go ahead. If the applicant, Eric, had finished his comments other than answering questions, which I thank him for, it was very interesting and good presentation. At this point, we would take further questions from HPAB members. Jessica, do you see anybody? I don't see any questions at this point.
I see Jason. Mark?
Yep, this is Mark Gerwing, HPAB. I don't have a question as much as a comment. You know, as mentioned earlier, the condition of the Springhouse is pretty dire. And I was wondering if there are plans or how the county might be able to help really in the immediate future to stabilize that structure, being that the Springhouse is really important to the history of this site, maybe more so than the other retained structures.
So this is Denise, and I can answer that. We do have our grant funds available, so and we have talked to Eric about that in the past, and I think he's looking forward to being able to use our grant funds to do some work on these buildings. So he can apply for up to $10,000 per year for funds from us to help with stabilization and the eventual rehabilitation if he desires.
Yes, we would be very eager to do that, and we would welcome any recommendations that anyone could offer for persons who are familiar with the restoration of historic structures who might be able to assist us in that.
I'm sure Denise and Jessica could help you with that. There are a number of structural engineers who specialize in stone foundations and their stabilization that would be interesting to talk to.
The challenge, of course, in our case is first the spring needs to be contained. Right now, it simply overflows the old cistern that it was once in. So that needs to be something needs to be happen there so that it doesn't any longer undermine the structure itself.
I see Jason and has been raised for a while, but Jason, did you want to say something?
My questions were answered by Eric when he made his.
Okay, you might want to take your hand down. I just saw this raising hand. Well, as far as I have a question about the Springhouse restoration. Can you see, are there enough remains to see what the original footprint was and the original interior partition?
I believe I caught that question. You're wondering, can we tell what the original footprint of the building was at this time? Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So the footprint of the building is intact. It was inundated with water during the 2013 flood, but it was on the fringe of that flood. So it is merely a bit buried by sediment, but otherwise it's there.
And are there walls, interior walls? It sounded like you described more than one space in there.
Yes, so it appears that the Springhouse consists of 2 rooms. The central room is the stone edifice that you see. That was likely constructed first. I'm not an expert in construction at all, so this is just me hypothesizing. The secondary room is off on the eastern side of the building, and it appears to be an attachment that was done at a later time because its walls are made out of cinder block. The roof is a wood roof with sheet metal and otherwise wooden rafters on the inside.
I would recommend that you speak with an architect. Don't you think, Denise?
So I'm sorry, you're cutting out. I can't
Oh.
hear you.
Everyone needs to kind of mute their microphones if they're not speaking.
Question, Denise, I was just thinking, obviously he would need an architect and a structural engineer. Is that the kind of thing that you recommend, or how does that work?
Well, so we technically can't recommend anybody specific. I might be able to point him to some other projects that were similar, and he could follow up with those folks to try to get actual recommendations. And then we also can point him to the directory that's maintained by the State Historic Preservation Office, that they have a list of folks that have worked on historic projects in the past and have included their names in this directory that the state maintains.
Great. And the National Historic Preservation, whatever the full name is, has extensive information about restoring all different kinds of materials and buildings and dates. So that's a wealth of information if you're interested.
Yeah, that would be the National Trust for Historic Preservation.
Yes, correct. So
You could check the Park Service as well. They have preservation, they call them preservation briefs.
So it sounds to me, this is Caitlin, it sounds to me that everybody who is recommending resources for historic preservation is also of the opinion that we should move, that we approve this.
Yes.
Larry's nodding his head.
I'm
going to move that the Preservation Advisory Board approve and recommend, or that we approve docket HP 20-0001 Springdale under criterion 1 and subject to the 2 standard conditions listed in the staff report.
Second.
So this is Denise. I'm just going to jump in 1 second, and I may have missed it, but Chuck, did you open and close the public hearing and make sure there wasn't anybody else from the public available to speak?
No, I did not get a chance to get that in. Sorry. At this point, I would like to close the board comment and open it for public discussion. Are there any members of the public present that would like to comment? It can be done either by online, those procedures, or simply by calling in. Jessica, do you show any interest from other members of the public?
I don't, but I do want to remind people that if they did call in, they can use *6 to unmute themselves. I don't see it.
Yeah, go ahead, please. So seeing that there is no other public comment, I would like to close the public comment period and open this. I think we already had a motion, but for the record, if it could be repeated and followed by the second. Thank you.
Sure. This is Caitlin McKenna, and I move that we approve and recommend docket HP 20-0001 Springdale under criterion 1 and subject to the 2 standard conditions listed in the staff report.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. A roll call vote for this motion. Please see if I get this right. I guess individually we should all show our support this, and I will start by saying I'm in the affirmative.
Caitlin McKenna, affirm.
Margot Leach, affirmative.
Mark Irwing, yes.
Larry Powers, yes.
Marissa Ferreira, affirmative.
Stan Nielsen, yes.
And I think that we lost Rosalind.
It kind of looks that way, at least for the moment. However, that would be a majority vote in the affirmative. Oh, here she is.
Rosalind, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, you guys keep cutting out and it says this is an invalid connection.
Okay, well, we have you right now and we're voting, we're doing a roll call vote for the first landmark. If you'd like to give your yay or nay.
Yay.
Okay, so it looks like we have a unanimous support to recommend landmarking to the county commissioners for the docket HP 20-0001, the Springdale designation.
Thank you.
So at this point, I'd like to move on to docket HP 20-0002, the McNeil Mayhofer House. And I would entertain a staff presentation at this point. Thank you.
So I'll share my screen again here. Hopefully. Find the right one.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt. Am I free to go at this point? I wish to stay around for at least 15 more minutes, but then I have to make another appointment.
You would be more than welcome to stay and listen. All HPAB meetings are open to the general public. There's no requirement that you stay, of course, since your presentation was complete.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, everyone. I very much appreciate this.
Eric.
So I'm going to, again, try to share my screen. Maybe. For some reason, it's being persnickety. Okay. And so can you all see that screen now?
We've got it.
Yes.
So this is docket, and again, this is Denise Grimm with the land or the community planning and permitting staff. And this is docket HP 20-0002, the McNeil Mayhofer House. This is a landmark designation of the house with the site area buffered around it. It is at 10064 Empire Drive, and the owners are Kristen and Jay Schultz, and we're here again to determine if it qualifies for designation, to determine if the application is complete, and to formulate recommendations for the county commissioners. An application was submitted to designate the house with the site area by the owners, and they're requesting to designate a 30-foot perimeter around the house. There's also a non-historic shed within the perimeter, but that would be a non-contributing resource. In 1865, David Kerr homesteaded the land just north of the property and then acquired this property in 1883 from the Union Pacific Railway Company. He lived just to the north on what has become known as the Kerr Mayhofer Farm. In 1898, he deeded his land to his daughter Edith and her husband, Daniel McNeil. It's believed that they built the house around 1905, but soon after they moved to Boulder and rented out the house. Edith's sister Leanna married John Mayhofer, who's, again, the spelling changed at some point later, but they acquired the large family farm. The rental house was sold out of the family in the 1950s, but was bought back by Robert Mayhofer sometime after 1970 and once again used as a rental house. It's a nice example of a small Queen Anne. It's popular in residences from 1880 to around the turn of the century. The style decreased in popularity until about 1910 when it was replaced by colonial revival and Edwardian styles. Queen Anne characteristics on the house are the scalloped area, the scalloped siding under the gables, the turned porch supports and spindle work frieze, and a cutaway bay window, although the window has been replaced. We found that the property qualifies for designation under criteria 1 and 4. It's significant for its association with the development of agriculture in East Boulder County, and it's significant as an example of a Queen Anne vernacular farmhouse constructed in the early 20th century. We're recommending that the board approve and that the county commissioners approve the docket under criteria 1 and 4, and subject to this 2 standard conditions describing when a certificate of appropriateness is needed. And in addition to that, I wanted to note that, well, no, this isn't the one that has some extra conditions, so never mind. Let me just run through the pictures for you here. So here's a map that shows where it's located on Empire Drive. An aerial of the property. There is a county conservation easement on the property as well. And then this is the house. It's been vacant for some time, but the Schultzes have just recently purchased it and plan to turn it into their home. This is what it looked like in 1949. And that's all I have.
So at this point, I would like to open it for any comments from the owners. Listed here is Jay and Kristen Schultz, and so if they would like to present or not, their option.
We are here for questions. We don't have any public comment. I do have a 2-year-old in the background, so I'm going to put myself on mute. But if you do have questions, let me know.
And so, Jessica, are we showing any other questions or comments at this point?
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
Are you planning to restore it to the appearance of the 1949 photo, or that general kind of appearance?
Yes, that is our plan. We wish it was colored, because then we would love to figure out even like the perfect match to the colors. But overall, yes, that is our plan.
Thank you.
You might be able to find the original colors by, layers of paint, but.
We are excited to try that out and see if we can dig in. Be curious to see how many layers there are.
Yeah, that would be really cool. And I just have a question. There are two little there's an outbuilding and a barn in the old photographs. Are those still there?
Unfortunately, they're not.
Yeah, I think it's a precious little Victorian house and well worth preserving.
We're excited. It has some original flooring in it that we love. That kind of sold us on it. So we're excited.
Great.
I've got a question for Denise.
I'm here.
This is Mark Gerwing. How was the perimeter determined for the landmark? And is there any additional development anticipated on the site?
So, we often try to do a bit of a buffer, even if we're just designating a building, just so that we have, purview over reviewing anything that's near the structure. So if they were to build a garage or something, we could make sure it was reasonably compatible. And part of the conservation easement that was developed with the city, or not the city, with Boulder County, plus Lafayette and Louisville. So it's a jointly held conservation easement. And that was all negotiated before HPAB was ever involved or any historic folks were involved. It was delineated in that conservation easement that there would be a building envelope behind this house a ways. And the conservation easement allowed for either someone to do an addition to this house or to build a new house and not use the old house. And for the past several months, I've been working with parks and open space to, look at the possibility of sort of renegotiating the conservation easement, and the owners have been working with parks as well. We don't want someone to build a new house and demolish this house, and so they might be able to work with parks to buy back the ability to have two homes on the property and keep this one and still build a new one back in that building envelope. But they would also have the option of adding on to this house. But the conservation easement also talks about protecting historic resources. So it was a really confusing conservation easement, and I've been working with parks again over the past several months to try to figure out a good outcome to where we can save this house but still allow them to do what the conservation easement allows them to do. But this is the first step in that process, which is to get this structure protected. I believe their intent is to fix this one up and live in it, and then they might eventually build another house back behind in that building envelope. But then they'd have to renegotiate with parks to be able to keep this as a second dwelling unit on the property, or they might be able to just use this as an outbuilding if that didn't work out. They could remove the kitchen from this one and just use it as an additional structure on their property for their own use. So there are some options there, but we didn't designate the entire property in this case because there is that designated building envelope and a variety of things spelled out in that conservation easement that allows them to have additional square footage on the property. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, my concern would be that, if something was built that was either significantly large or very close to this historic resource, then it would lose its context as a farmhouse in a sense, and just because of proximity of other structures. But it sounds like that building envelope location is such that nothing's going to get built that's too terribly close to this.
At least it's behind the house, and we would be a referral agency, even though it wouldn't necessarily require a certificate of appropriateness for them to build the new house back behind in the building envelope. We would still be a referral agency that could comment on it when it does come in, if it does come in ever. And so we would be able to review the plans and comment on the plans, and have, some level of input on anything that really happens with the property.
Thanks, Denise. And thank you to the owners for taking this project on and wanting to step up and be stewards of this property. I think that's great.
Denise, I have a question.
Sure.
Do you have a map showing where the building envelope is for a possible new residence?
Let me double check and see if I've got that in here. So I don't have the actual map, but can you see, let's see. Oh, don't think you can see my cursor.
There was a map included in our packet, I think on page 7.
Okay, let me see if I can find that.
Yeah, it is in the packet. I saw it as well.
Yeah, I see it too.
It's page 49 out of 101.
Okay, so Jason, can you see that screen? Or do I need to unshare and reshare?
I can see it.
I think you need to unshare and reshare if you're trying to share the packet, Denise.
Okay, let me try that 1 second. So can you see that now?
I can't.
I could see it before, but now I can't.
How about now?
No,
Yeah,
now I can.
Yep.
Yes. Yep. Oh, there. Great.
So yeah, so here, you can see that sort of on the eastern edge of the property, there's that little loop driveway. That's where the existing house is. It's pretty tiny on there. But then you see that there's a pretty large building envelope where they, so somewhere in that larger building envelope would a new house could be accommodated.
are there any limits about size of the house, height, in terms of positioning it within that building envelope?
There's not anything about the position within the building envelope, but there are size limits to how much they can build. And I don't know if I have, I don't think the whole conservation easement is in here.
Yeah.
But there is a size limit to how much they can build in terms of residential square footage as well as agricultural outbuilding square footage. And I just don't have that number right in front of me.
Is that the standard presumptive house size limit?
No, it's a different number that Parks came up with. And
I do have a rough number, at least. I believe it's 3,000 square feet, including the 900 square foot farmhouse for residential, and then I think another roughly 3,000 square feet for agriculture.
Okay, thank you.
What did you say? Another 3,000 square foot what?
For agricultural structures.
Oh, right. So Denise, you were saying something about, is it correct that right now they're not allowed to have 2 dwelling units on it?
Yeah, currently the conservation easement specifies that it's not allowed to have 2 dwelling units. Like, normally we can ask for an accessory dwelling unit for a historic resource.
Right.
But the conservation easement that was drafted only allowed for just 1 dwelling unit. And so, again, they could try to renegotiate that with Parks, but that generally requires them to buy back the development right, and those can be fairly expensive. But I know that there have been discussions going on about that, possibility with Parks, but it has to go through a process and be approved by everyone. And because this involves, a conservation easement held by the city or the county as well as Lafayette and Louisville, all involved in it, there's going to have to be some input from everybody to renegotiate that. Or
Denise.
they could build a new house and keep this house but not use it as a separate residence, just use it as an outbuilding for like their farm office or their home office or storage or something like that.
Okay, good.
Denise, I have a question, Denise.
And who is this?
This is Larry.
Okay, hi, Larry.
But for the matter at hand here, since it is under criteria 1 and 4, an additional house or the view shed is not under our consideration, correct?
Well, it can always impact the integrity, or the feel, the association of the building. So while it wouldn't require a certificate of appropriateness if it wasn't within the 30-foot boundary, we would still be a referral agency for any land use docket or any building permit that comes in. And we would have the ability to at least have some input on the project.
And is this outside of the city limits of Louisville?
Yeah, it's between Louisville and Lafayette.
Okay, I thought it was perhaps still in Louisville, because I actually saw this house like last week when I was driving through that area. And it's so close, it seems like it's Louisville.
Yeah, it's, I think somewhere I had a picture that kind of showed where the city limits were. And it's, there's just this sort of strip of land in between the two jurisdictions. And so it kind of falls right in the middle there. I don't know if I have a better picture of it here, but.
It's like the map on page 39.
Yeah, so there you can kind of see all the gray area are the cities, and then the white areas are the county. So there's just that little enclave there that is still in our jurisdiction.
So this is Marissa Ferreira. It does look like there is a barn on the property as well. Is that considered the non-contributing shed that isn't included in this landmark, or is that a separate building altogether?
So let me go back here to some of the pictures. So there was sort of the remains of a barn that used to be there. There's still like a tough shed there, but there used to be the remains of a barn, and I'll find that here. So that was on the property, but sometime between when these pictures were taken and when the property sold, that was removed.
So that picture that structure is no longer there.
Correct.
Okay.
So are there further questions from board members or further comments that the owners would like to make at this point? Jessica, do you have any?
I don't see anybody. And did you already ask for public comment?
No, that's where we're going now. So hearing, go ahead.
No, you're good.
So at this point, I'd like to open the discussion for public comment. Are there any members of the public would like to comment on this docket? Hearing none, I will close the public comment and entertain motions for this docket on HP 20-0002.
I move that the Historic Preservation Advisory Board approve and recommend that the BOCC approve docket HP 20-0002 Mayhofer House under criteria 1 and 4 and subject to the 2 standard conditions listed in the staff report.
Second.
At this point, I would like to take a roll call vote then on please by yea or nay and your name.
Mark Irving, yes.
Stan Nilsson, yes.
Larry Powers, yes.
Jason Emery, yes.
Marissa Ferreira, yes.
Margot Leach, yes.
Rosalind Scamahorn, yes.
And Charles Gray, yes. Don't think I missed anybody. If I did, yell at me. At this point, we have a unanimous recommendation for docket HP-20-002. Mayhofer House to refer to the Boulder County Commissioners for recommendation for approval. Thank you. Moving smartly forward to the next docket, which would be HP-20-003. I will find it here in a minute.
I wanted to quickly thank Jay and Kristen for making it to the meeting.
Thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it.
So this is Denise from staff again. Can you see my screen again?
I can.
Yes.
Okay. So this is docket HP 20-0003, the Marshall Farmhouse. It's at 1498 Marshall Road, and it is owned by McKay Estates LLC. We're here again to determine if it qualifies for designation, to determine if the application is complete, and formulate recommendations for the county commissioners. And we've received application for landmark designation of the site area, including 4 structures, 3 of which are contributing and 1 of which is non-contributing. We've included the farmhouse, the Springhouse, and the milk house, and the non-contributing resource is the historic garage. However, we would still require HPAB approval of any alterations to the garage because they had certain conditions as part of their site plan review process to require that. But it is a structure that's been altered over the years and isn't quite as nice as the others. So we wouldn't be as particular with that one. The area was homesteaded by Peter Powell in 1865, but based on the National Folk style, the existing farmhouse wasn't built until the 1890s. This style was popular in the late 1800s for efficient and affordable housing. Most National Folk houses were narrow 2-story houses with steep roof pitches with a front gable shape and simple detailing. The house is modest in detailing with only the hip-capped return gables. Property changed hands a number of times before and after the house was built and was owned by locally prominent families such as the DeBachers and Duns, although it's not clear who owned the house. The house is separate from the other historic structures by the Marshall ditch, which dates to 1865. The historic Springhouse and Milk House were stuccoed over around 1958 by the Easts, who owned the property for several decades and built a raised ranch house to the east of the farmhouse in 1960. In February of 2018, a subcommittee of HPAB reviewed the historic resources and found the historic farmhouse, springhouse, and milkhouse eligible for landmark status based on the photo documentation, subject to an architectural inventory being done on the property. And then the inventory form was completed in 2018 and concurred, but it also included the garage. In May of 2020, the new owners were granted permission to deconstruct the 1960 house and a non-conforming residence and construct a new house and barn. With this approval came a condition to landmark the property. We found that the property qualifies for designation under criterion 1 and 4. It's significant for its association with the development of agriculture or dairy agriculture specifically in southeast Boulder County. And it's significant as an example of a national folk style farmhouse constructed in the late 19th century. And we're recommending approval of the docket under criteria 1 and 4 and subject to our typical conditions for when a certificate of appropriateness is required. But I also want to add in that the new driveway for the house that we recently approved would encroach within the 20-foot buffer. And I'm recommending that that only requires staff review and not a certificate of appropriateness. And staff would just want to check to make sure it doesn't appear to be so close that it would endanger the foundations of those buildings. So that is one of the things I wanted to add. And let me run through the photos here. Maybe. There we go. So this is where the property is located on Marshall Road, south of Boulder. Aerial, a little closer aerial, and you can see where the Marshallville ditch goes through the property. And then the newer development is down here in the southeast corner of the property, and out in the field out here is where that older house is. And here's a closer view showing the house, the garage, the spring house, the milk house, and again, the area to be landmarked includes the area within the red, which are the buildings with the 20-foot buffer around them. And again, the new driveway for when this newer house gets rebuilt might encroach into that 20 feet, but staff will look at it and make sure it isn't impacting negatively those structures that are closer to that. Here's the south elevation of the farmhouse, and the west, and the north. And then this is how it looked in 1949. I think that should be the east elevation. I think that photo is mislabeled. But anyway, there it is in 49. And then this is the milk house, greenhouse, and the garage. And so you can see that the garage has been altered by the carport addition and the newer garage door. And then I recommend again that we approve the docket under criteria 1 and 4 with the 2 standard conditions. But also, making sure that we note that the house, spring house, and milk house are the contributing resources. The garage is the non-contributing resource, but we'll still need our review for alteration again, and that's based on a condition of approval of the site plan review process that we recently went through. And then also it's anticipated that the new driveway may encroach into that 20-foot buffer, and only staff review would be needed to just verify that it didn't negatively impact the structures. And that's all I have.
So at this point, entertain comments from the owner if they're present. I'm not sure. And is there an owner present or a representative?
I think earlier we had Rhonda and David McKay. I'm not sure if they're still here though.
we are here right now. We're listening in and we support whatever you all decide. We're looking forward to this.
We're open to questions, but we don't have any particular comments at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, I'd entertain questions or comments from HPAB members.
This is Mark Gerwing, HPAB. I guess I have a similar question that I had before on the previous docket, which was, do we have concerns that additional development will jeopardize the farmhouse context of the original buildings by being significantly close to and reducing the context of that resource? Denise, any thoughts?
So that was part of a referral that we received. Again, this project has sort of spanned the years here. They started the process back in 2018, and they revised their design a number of different times through the course of that time. And let me try to get back here to the site plan. Whoops. And so, the house again is out here in the field, and then the things that are happening up here, this house is being replaced with a newer house. And then this was also a residence. And so there's a new barn and a new house going into those locations. But no development really approved out here by this house. And so we did have the referral that came through to us in 2018, where we reviewed, basically the new development. And as part of that, that's where we asked for these things to be landmarked as part of that process. But unless they changed the plans that recently got approved, we've already reviewed and commented on that part of it. But in the future, if they ever propose to build anything new, again, we would receive a referral on that and have the ability to review it and comment on it.
So Denise, how did one arrive at the red border? Because the building, the complex would be protected if there was simply a bigger buffer around it.
Well, again, anywhere on the property will be a referral agency, but it will only require a certificate of appropriateness if it's within the red area.
So Denise, to be clear, then the house that's there now, the large house that's there now, and what you refer to as the stucco house is not included in this area.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of hard to believe that there's a James Hunter house buried inside that house at some point. But that's not the proposed boundary.
Right. We reviewed that back in 2018 and determined that because it had been altered so much already, that it was no longer eligible. Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is HPAB member Charles Gray. Is the intent then, or is it in fact that the farmhouse we're considering, is that, what is its use? Is that going to be an ADU, or is it just storage, or what is it?
It's not a residence currently. It's been just used for storage over recent years, or for many, many, many years. And if they ever wanted to use it as a separate residence, they would have to go through a limited impact special review process to request that. And so, it can only at this point be used just for accessory storage, or again, something like a home office, or something like that. That's not a separate residence.
Okay. So are there other questions or comments from board members at this time? Hearing none, I will close that section of the meeting and look for members of the public. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this docket number HP-20-0003? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move that the Historic Preservation Advisory Board approve and recommend that the BOCC approve docket HP 20-0003 Marshall Farmhouse under criteria 1 and 4 and subject to the 2 standard conditions listed in the staff report, noting that the house, Springhouse, and milk house are contributing and the garage is non-contributing, but will still need HPAB approval for alterations. It is anticipated that the new driveway may encroach on the 20-foot buffer with only staff review added or needed, sorry.
Second.
This is Stan Mills. I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. At this point, I would like to take the same type of roll call vote for the record with HPAB members' names, please.
Chuck, would you like me to, this is Jessica Basic with staff. Would you like me to call those names for you?
That might work better or move faster.
Okay, I'll call them then. Caitlin McKenna,
I approve.
Chuck Gray,
Approve.
Marissa Ferreira,
Approve.
Jason Emery,
Approve.
Larry Powers,
Approved.
Margot Leach,
Approve.
Mark Gerwing,
Approved.
Approve.
and once again, I think we lost Rosalind.
I'll give a second and see if she reappears. Otherwise, I would recommend that we, since the rest of it's unanimous, that we move forward. At this point, you would consider the docket HP 20-003 approved by Historic Preservation Advisory Board. That is all the dockets that are listed on the agenda. Are there any further comments or discussions from staff or board members?
I have nothing else.
So at this point, I will close the July 2nd.
Can you hold on a moment, please, Chuck?
Sure.
I'm checking the agenda. Do you have the agenda in front of you, Chuck?
Somewhere.
For the other business?
Hold on a second. I think I've got it. Maybe.
Okay.
I have the agenda.
We've got introductions of HPAB members and then election of officers.
Oh, I apologize. I missed a whole part.
No
Sorry about that
worries.
too. I should have. I was trying to remember. Well, I can't rely on my memory anymore, so.
So I think we wanted to do introductions because we do have our new member, Mark Gerwing, who joined us in March, but we had we didn't have a quorum that night. I think we only had 4 members. And introduce ourselves to him and let him introduce himself as well. Denise, should I can turn this back over to you.
Okay. So we can maybe start with Chuck. Do you want to introduce yourself, Chuck?
Sure. My name is Chuck Gray, and I've been with HPAB for a while. I'm a retired control systems and industrial engineer with significant interest in historic preservation, and I'm currently the vice chair. Unfortunately, we lost our chair a while back.
And I can go back down through that list and call on people and put pressure on them. Caitlin, would you like to say something?
Hi, we met before, I believe. I'm Caitlin McKenna. This is my, I think, second on the board. I'm a software engineer. I have a undergrad and master's in history and my master's in historic preservation and public history. And I am a lifelong Boulder resident, Boulder County, and yeah, that's me.
Marissa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name's Marissa Ferreira. I am also a lifelong Boulder County resident. I work as an accountant for my day-to-day job, but I do really enjoy historic preservation and have been on the board. This is now my second term, so I'm excited to be here and continue to be here. And it's been a very interesting and great learning opportunity.
Jason?
Unmute yourself, Jason.
I think I've had good fortune to meet Mark before, but I would like to welcome him to HPAB. I own a long-established land surveying and mapping business here in Boulder. I also had the good fortune to spend 3 terms as the Boulder County surveyor. So hopefully I bring something to the party. I've been with HPAB for a while now, and welcome.
And Denise, can you unshare your screen?
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, no worries. And then that's Larry is next.
Hello, I'm Larry Powers, going on my second year on the board. I have a doctorate in history, I have a degree in historic preservation, and another degree in public history, and finishing another degree in library and information sciences with an archives specialty. So that's me.
And Margot, you're next.
Unmute.
Here we go. Margot Leach. It was nice to meet you, Mark, and I'm glad you're on the board. I'm an architect with, we specialize in new houses and historic and renovation and restoration of historic structures. And I'm a relatively new board member. I think I haven't quite been on for a year. I'm not sure. I think it's my first year. So.
Stan, are you available?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Stan Nilsson. I live in Longmont. I've been on the HPAB now for 2 terms. I guess I'm the transportation guy. I'm also a member of the Santa Fe Historical Society, and I've enjoyed being a participant here for all these years, and I look forward to continuing. Thank you.
And that brings us to Mark. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'm an architect. I've been in Boulder for about 20 years. Was formerly on the City of Boulder's Landmarks Board, and I'm looking forward to service on this board and getting to understand the resources in the county and working with you all.
Thank you all. So now we have election of officers. So if anyone wants to nominate someone or volunteer or anything, we need a chair and a vice chair. Jason, you're muted.
Sorry. I nominate Chuck Gray to be Supreme Commander of the HPAB.
I was going to agree with that. This is Marissa. Chuck, you've done a great job stepping in, and I'd like to see you continue as chair. So that's my recommendation as well.
Well, thank you. And I would be willing to do that.
So can we vote on that?
Yes, please.
Do you want me to run through those names? Denise?
Yeah, I think we do need to do a roll call vote on this.
Okay. Caitlin McKenna?
Yes. Chuck.
Chuck Gray?
I won't vote for myself, but I am willing to do it.
Marissa Ferreira seconded it.
Yes.
Emery, I assume.
Yes.
Larry Powers,
Yes.
Margot Leach,
Yes.
Mark Gerwing,
Yes.
and Stan Nelson.
Yes.
And then if we could get a nomination for vice chair.
I nominate Mark for vice chair. I know he's new to the board, but he clearly has experience on the City of Boulder Landmark Board, and I attended a subcommittee with Mark and was very impressed with his architectural skills in renovating a Charles Hartling home, and I think he's a great addition to the board, and I'd love to see him support us.
And this is Chuck Gray, and I would fully concur with that. So I would be the second.
And so, Mark, are you good with that? Willing to do that?
Yeah, sure. I'd be willing to do that. I'm a little new to the board, but I'll catch up.
Okay, I'll run through those names again then. Caitlin McKenna,
Yep.
and Chuck Gray,
Yes.
and Marissa,
Yes.
and Jason Emery,
Yes.
Larry Powers,
Yes.
Margot Leach,
Yep.
and Mark said he would be willing to do it, and Stan Nelson.
Yes.
Well, thank you, everyone. Jessica, did I forget anything else? As I often do?
No, but if well, just if Carol Beam is still here, and I just wondered if we should introduce Carol as well.
That would be great if you're here, Carol. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Yep. Carol Beam, Parks and Open Space. I'm the Cultural Resource Specialist for Open Space. So I assist the county in managing cultural resources on open space. And I did want to put a disclaimer out there for the Mayhofer landmarking that Denise had talked about, the conservation easement from Parks and Open Space and being a little bit wonky. That was done by our real estate staff, and I had no involvement in that. I wish they would have talked to me, but there's no requirement for them to come speak to me, even though we work in the same department. And I'm sorry that the conservation easement from Parks and Open Space ended up being less than ideal in terms of what Denise had to deal with, but you can only do what you know what you can do, and if you're not asked, you can't do much about it. So hopefully moving forward, there'll be better coordination with Denise and CPP, and maybe I'll even get invited along to talk about it. So that's about it. I've been with the county for 17 years now.
And I
Thank
would,
you,
I
Carol.
would certainly like to add that Carol is a huge resource for the HPAB and is always welcome to come talk to us. Generally fascinating.
Here, here.
Go
Thank you.
Carol, go Carol.
Thanks, Larry.
We like your field trips too.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully we can get back to some field trips next year.
That's great.
So is there any further business that I perhaps have forgotten?
May I chime in?
Certainly.
I would just like to remember Jim Burris and all that he did for the board. He was there before I was, and he ran a good ship. And also when we were out on our field trips, he was always very interested and open to learning about things and also sharing what knowledge he had about a variety of subjects. He was quite a well-educated and talented man. So I just want to say out loud that I appreciate all he did, and he's going to be sorely missed.
Here, here.
I agree completely. Stan Nilsson.
Absolutely. Always a fascinating and ran meetings, certainly better than I do, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing his name up. And, you know, I'm new to the board. I'm new to Colorado. So but even in the very, very short time that I knew him, I also learned all these different subjects that he has expertise in that very relatively short time that I knew him. So he will be missed.
And this is Denise again. I'm at the last meeting. I mentioned that you know, we had a desire to rename our grant program after him since he was so instrumental in getting it going, and I'm still planning to do that. We just have not had as much direct contact with the county commissioners since COVID came up, but they know that we want to do that, and so it's just a matter of formally getting the paperwork before them in a business meeting to give us their stamp of approval, but that will be happening before we update our paperwork or our next application packet.
Well, hail Mr. Burris.
Yes. Anything else? If not, thank you all.
Oh,
Chuck, do you want to close us out?
Certainly. So, and as usual, thanks to Denise and Jessica for keeping us the straight and narrow and making this all happen. So at this point, I would like to close the July 2nd, 2020 meeting of the Historic Preservation Advisory Board. So closed.